Well, for more now on that story, let's speak to Robert Kelly. He's an associate professor in the Department of Political Science and Diplomacy at South Korea's Pusan National University. Robert, very good to speak to you this morning. Tell us why now for this test. Is it posturing for his birthday in terms of the leader?
Sure, there are a couple of big events coming up. The first is obviously the birthday. Although it's not really clear that this is actually today is actually his birthday. The North Koreans tend not to divulge that sort of information about high-end elites. There's also a major party congress for the North Korean Communist Party coming up in a few months. And there are also South Korean parliamentary elections in April. The North Koreans have a tradition of trying to influence South Korean politics through shows of force like this. I wouldn't be surprised if that is what is it aimed at.
And Robert, just tell us, where does the leader see this as going? He was roundly condemned by the world and by China for this alleged test. What kind of posturing is going on here?
Well, North Korea has had a nuclear weapons program going back decades. It became very serious in the 1990s. The Americans considered airstrikes against it in 1994. The first nuclear detonation by North Korea was in 2006, and they've been testing ever since then. So in terms of just sort of like strictly scientifically, it makes sense, I suppose, that North Korea continues to test to make sure that these things work. I think what people were really concerned about, sort of to your question, sort of where does this go? The next step technologically would be the move from traditional sort of simplistic atomic weapons like what the United States used in World War II to much more destructive hydrogen weapons. This is what the United States and the Soviets deployed during the Cold War. And these are substantially more destructive. And that's what many people think this test the other day was. And maybe it was a first step or a bridge towards developing that much more powerful weapon.
But without ICBMs, they're not going to be able to launch them. Without intercontinental ballistic missiles, they're not going to be able to launch them, will they?
Yeah, that's right. That's the next big challenge. I mean, the other big challenge, we haven't talked about it much in the last few days because the H-bomb moniker sort of stole all the attention. But, these things also need to be miniaturized, and then they actually need to be placed on top of a missile, right? And the missile has to be reasonably accurate. And if you want to hit a target far away like the United States, as you said, it needs to be an ICBM. It's not clear to me, actually, that North Korea wants to strike North America. I mean, they say this kind of stuff, but I think North Korea would probably be satisfied with regional deterrence, that is the ability to hit South Korea and Japan, which they probably already have. There's a big discussion about whether or not they can actually launch an ICBM. That's very complicated technology, and North Korean satellite tests to date, technology is similar, have not worked well.
Now, Robert, finally, just give us an idea. What can be done to break this cycle of test, condemnation and rapprochement with the North? How are we going to get out of this spiral that we're in at the moment?
I'm not really sure there is a way, because the North Koreans don't seem to pull over no matter what we say or no matter what we do. You can always argue for more sanctions. I would actually argue that North Korea is under sanctioned. Many people think that North Korea is very heavily embargoed. I don't think that's actually true. I do also think that China holds a great deal more leverage over North Korea than the Chinese admit. This is often brought up every time the North Koreans do something. People always say, well, China needs to do more, and China tells us, well, actually, we really don't have this kind of influence. I don't actually think that's correct. I think China has a lot of economic influence, particularly over North Korea, which they don't use. The final point I would make, I think this is sort of the real future, particularly for Japan and South Korea, which are right next to the threat, is missile defense. That is to say that if the North Koreans are going to continue to build these things and they will continue to build missiles, then air defense is really the only possible alternative. I mean, striking North Korea would be hugely dangerous. So defensive weaponry, air defense, in my opinion, is the way forward, at least for the next few years.
Well, Robert Kelly from Pusan National University in South Korea, thank you for now.